as we go on this journey of improving sales planning efforts with our customers.
So eating one's own dog food or drinking your own champagne is the case.
Another way to say it, you bet.
Hi, I'm Scott Barton, and this is What I Wish I Knew. Now, for those of you that watch these videos or read the blogs, you know that I'm a sales compensation person. I've worked in sales compensation for years, and I know a lot about that discipline, but I always wish I knew more about sales planning. So those processes and activities that are upstream from compensation that if they work well, can make my job easier, and if they don't work so well, you know the result. So I'm pleased to have today a person who knows a lot about this area, Sarah Van Caster. She is the Vice President of Growth Product Marketing at Varicent. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Scott. Happy to be here. I love this series.
Great. Well, thanks for being here. So sounds like you've got a big job. Tell us a little bit about what you're responsible for.
Well, my focus here at Varicent is really collaborating with all of our go-to-market teams to market and sell our sales planning solution. And we're really all about delivering solutions that help revenue leaders deliver the growth that's required by their business.
Very cool. Very important. So how did you get into this? What's your background?
Well, I've been working with sales and operations teams for my entire career. I've been in sales technology from the beginning. I enjoy working with revenue teams because there's nothing more near and dear to an organization than revenue. And there's so much passion, as you know, among sales teams, which I absolutely love. And helping them really solve their biggest challenges and discover new, more effective routes to market has always been exciting to me.
Well, that's terrific background. Sounds like you can definitely help me know more about this area. So I'm pleased that we're talking. You know, my wife likes to say that we plan so that we're prepared. And that makes sense. But boy, does it seem like it's getting harder and harder to have a plan and have that plan work out for you. You know, I was just reading this morning that, there's cost cutting and layoffs. So Meta announced a big layoff. Amazon's going through cost cutting. But then we have like Fair Isaac that, crushed its last quarter and its guidance is so high that their shares shot up 30%. So it's a real mixed bag, but there are a lot of companies that are missing their earnings target, a lot of layoffs, we know. Something tells me that if you're a sales operations professional, though, your job should be pretty secure. But what do you think?
Yeah, lots of volatility, right? But you're keying in on something definitely with sales operations that we're really seeing across industries. You're right, not a lot of layoffs going on. Sales operations is really becoming one of the most strategic aspects of the broader go-to-market organization, and their responsibilities continue to increase. Across the role in general. The function's no longer just about collecting data and building reports and throwing them over to sales. Sales operations teams are really getting quite sophisticated in how they can build and manage their plans that really drive the performance of the entire sales organization. And there was actually a recent LinkedIn study on the state of sales operations, and they found that there's been in recent years a 38% increase in sales operations roles. And to contrast that with sales in general, it's almost 5 times. There's about 4.8 times as much of an increase as we've seen in sales roles across the board. So you're right, definitely in high demand. And like I said, we're seeing that trend across industries, but especially high among life sciences, software and high tech, and public safety.
Wow. Well, that's good news, but probably kind of crazy once you get into those jobs. So I like to lay out, at a high level, what it is that I know about sales planning in a sequence, and then you can help me fill in the gaps. How's that? So it starts, I think, where the sales leader has a forecast and they get into capacity planning. Sure. So how many salespeople do I need? And then that goes into territory planning, because based on the company's market coverage approach, you have different jobs and different geographic areas. So you have to think through, how many people do I need in each one of those areas? And then you've got quotas, because you've got to determine, all right, how much sales volume do I need from each person in each job? And then that's when it gets to compensation, right? Because it's, okay, how much are we going to pay each of these people for hitting their quota? So I kind of understand that, but what did I leave out?
You've definitely got the big buckets, but I would say sequence is a tricky word, right? With all of these facets of planning, the complexity lies in how connected all of these things are. So, yes, absolutely. In the beginning, you're doing things like looking at the forecast, looking at past year or past period numbers, and trying to figure out where you need to make adjustments. But all of these pieces, the territories, the quotas, the compensation, looking at your capacity, all of this really needs to be done with kind of the bigger picture in mind, and understanding how changes to each of these areas are going to have a ripple effect across the plans. So that is really where a lot of the complexity lies here. And one other thing that I would just add, Scott, it's often folded into probably the territory planning. But in addition to measuring the capacity of your organization, you also really want to make sure that part of your planning includes looking at your customers and accounts and figuring out how to segment them, how to score and rank them, to really understand who should we be prioritizing. It's likely that the buying conditions, again, we're seeing this across industries, of your customers and prospects are likely changing and evolving. And there are certain things that your sellers know about their customers and certain things that they don't know. So being able to be a little bit more thoughtful, data-driven with how you're evaluating your customers' likelihood to buy is also an important piece.
So all accounts are not created equal, and we have to plan for that in things like capacity planning and quotas. And that connectivity piece that you had mentioned, I can appreciate how important that is. I've been through a number of sequences, right, where we are planning to complete the plan changes, for a particular planning cycle. And we've got a due date, which is the sales kickoff. We're ready to roll the plans, but we're waiting for quotas. And as we get closer to that due date, the people that are working on the quotas say, yeah, no problem, we're going to be ready. And then, a few weeks go by, we don't know if sure we're going to make it. And then, all information just goes away. We don't really know when the quotas are going to be done. And neither do the salespeople, which is a real problem. So how do we fix quotas? I mean, is part of the cure there upstream from the quota process?
Oh, gosh, absolutely. We could talk the rest of the time about this topic and what you just described. I have no doubt anybody tuning in is saying, oh, yeah, we've been there. And even when you think you have a good plan in place and all of a sudden there's a curveball thrown in and you got to reevaluate, change things up and do it last minute. And oftentimes the delivery of those plans, because of all of these connection points, gets pushed out, and sellers are sitting there wondering what their territory is, what their quotas are. And the longer that all takes, the tougher things get for the sales organization to really deliver. So how do we get better at that process? No real easy answer to that, but I would say two key components are definitely trying to get better at the collaboration across all the parties that are involved in that quota setting process, and ideally having some technology to really support that effort. So when quotas aren't allocated effectively, or they're getting out the door late after the fiscal year rolls out, it's nearly impossible, like you just described at that point, for sales comp programs to really be effective. When you want to look at improving your quota performance and even the planning process related to that, one of the first questions that I recommend starting with is, what should your quota attainment actually be? Do you know that you want 80%, 75% of your sellers hitting their number? Do you even know what that, kind of attainment curve looks like ideally, as far as, your revenue goals and what you're trying to do as a business? Also, okay, so what's the ideal state and what's the reality and what's the gap between? So spoiler alert, you definitely don't want 100% attainment, but you also don't want 30% attainment for your sellers. Everybody's going to head out the door. So really making sure you have a solid understanding based on what your sales organization looks like, based on what you're trying to do as a company, what should that attainment really look like? And whether you're taking a top down or bottom up, or a lot of organizations do some sort of combined approach to setting targets, it's most effective when it's a collaborative effort. I don't think anyone would disagree there. But what that means is you often bog down the process by getting more and more folks involved. So to really do quota planning in a timely manner, you're going to want some technology that can really enable that collaboration across all of the folks that need to be involved. So even those individual sellers, if you're doing bottoms up planning, but certainly the ops team, all the various levels of leadership, as well as the sales comp team as well.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I want to understand a little bit more about the technology. Before we get there, though, just like the timeliness of the information and the degree to which you can reset a plan. So let's say, the capacity plan is to hire, 30 people, 30 salespeople. And this was something that we decided on a few weeks ago. And then, we find out yesterday, right, that 5 have quit. So now I need 35 people. So how do I change, or how easily can I change the plan based on, near real-time information?
I bet a lot of folks listening to this just caught real-time information, and how do we get that? What does that look like? Again, if you don't have a solution that can really help you do that truly in real time, trying to figure out the right move there is tough. Because who were those 5 folks that headed out the door? And if you can only fill 2 or 3 of those roles, what kind of skills need to be brought in, what kind of levels? There's a lot of variability to those questions. And you might have overcapacity somewhere. If you've got a territory that's really stocked with sellers, is there an adjustment instead of a net new head count, but really a shuffle that could take place? So lots of different levers that a sales or sales operations leader can be evaluating. But if you don't have the ability to measure the impact of what that change is going to be, you're really doing a lot of that planning blind. And your example, Scott, of, you've got 30 and then all of a sudden, 5 sellers leave, or there's a cut in head count. That isn't something that only happens during the planning cycle on an annual basis, right? Those are things that are happening all year long. So really the operations teams and the sales leaders that can get visibility to those changes that are happening and be able to quickly assess and weigh the trade-offs of the options that they have are those that are really able to help keep their sales organizations on track throughout the year.
Yeah. And just to drill into that example a little bit more, and appreciating all the metrics that could be applicable. I mean, with recruiting, so all right, we've got 5 extra seats open. Now, whether we can fill those seats in 6 weeks or it takes 6 months makes a big difference on the plan. And I, being somewhat familiar with these estimates on, attrition, I can tell you we've never considered, the timing of what it takes to recruit people and how that number can change, based on the economy, let's say.
Predicting seller turnover, it's really tough. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of different factors that are coming into play. And there's a lot of subjectivity as well. So there are certainly metrics that you can be monitoring. I've never heard a sales organization say, we don't have a turnover problem at all. That's not the reality for any sales team. So being able to, again, understand what is a healthy amount of turnover for your organization and identifying what that looks like, but also keying in on the signals that are indicating that your turnover is a problem. So certainly things like poor quota attainment, low commission payouts, those are going to be signals that you're going to have some frustrated sellers. But there are also some, like I said, some subjective things that you're also going to want to be considering. There are a lot of things that impact when sellers are going to leave. Certainly over the past couple of years, burnout, work-life balance have been things that have gotten some spotlight, all for good reasons. Another interesting thing to measure is a lot of sellers will cite poor management as a reason to leave, but the flip side of that is they'll cite strong leadership as a reason to stay. So for anyone who feels that they've got a turnover problem within the sales organization, the first step again is to figure out what the cause of that turnover is, put steps in place to measure what's really causing that, and then figure out again kind of the levers that you can pull to try to keep the sellers that you really need to hold on to. And that's your A players as well as your B players, and figuring out what's going to get them to stay.
Yeah, and ideally you can predict with some degree of accuracy what the turnover might be. So let's talk about technology. I mean, this is where you're focused right now, and how is tech changing this space?
Oh my, yes, you are keying in on something that I feel like is really exciting. If we think about sales technology and kind of do a quick history lesson here, sales technology has really never been built to address planning. And there are a lot of reasons for that. First of all, if you ask sales organizations traditionally, how do you do planning? How do you prioritize it? It has never been the established discipline that it is on the finance side of the house, or what demand and inventory planning looks like within a supply chain organization. Sales is laser focused on revenue, and they put their plans in place, but they are so focused on the execution to achieve those revenue goals that, again, there hasn't been a lot of rigor historically put into sales planning practices and disciplines. So to that end, the technology has really been focused where sales organizations have been focused, driving that revenue, executing the day-to-day kind of blocking and tackling that happens within the sales organization. So, of course, the major investment is the CRM, the customer relationship management software that does all of that day-to-day management of sellers' activities and leads and accounts, all of that good stuff. So necessary. We've also seen a proliferation of sales technology all around that CRM. So enablement software, prospecting tools, again, all of these things focused on the executional aspects of what the sales organization is doing to deliver their revenue. But when you ask about planning and strategy and what the sales leaders are doing to figure out what the sellers should be focused on, how the operations teams build out those quotas, build out those territories, everything gets dumped into spreadsheets. Everything, there's lots of data downloads, but spreadsheets layered on spreadsheets, tabs after tabs. So some of the most strategic efforts of the sales organization are still being done outside of all of that technology. So I think it's really an exciting time for technology to come in and be able to address what is becoming such a top priority now, with getting better and more effective at these planning things we've been discussing.
You mentioned spreadsheets, and I've asked people before, hey, can I better understand how you're executing your process upstream? And they'll say, sure, let me show you my model. It's like, I don't want to know about that. It's just frightening to look at. And how are companies taking advantage of this technology? I mean, what's an example of where this is starting to take root?
Well, let me speak most truthfully about our own company, Varicent. We've actually gone through our own journey of really improving our sales planning efforts. So it's been great to see internally we're using our own solution, but in addition to the technology, we've really done a lot of changes to the overall sales planning process here. So as Varicent, a couple years ago, we spun out of IBM and were our own company again, and realized that there were certain things that we really needed to improve upon if we were going to grow and do all of the great things that we're all here to do. So as part of that, our sales operations team really took on overhauling how we do sales planning. So like everyone, we were doing all of our territory and quota planning all in a spreadsheet. And I remember our sales ops team showing me their spreadsheets, and it was the most beautiful artwork I've ever seen in Excel. There were endless tabs. They even had maps of all of our territories built into, so that the sales leaders could visually see what our territories look like. But of course, every time there was a change to the territories, they had to go re-copy and paste and change those maps. I mean, it was quite a Herculean effort that our sales operations team was managing. And of course, every time, like every sales organization, we as Varicent deal with new people coming in, with sellers ramping up, with folks leaving or changing positions. And the sales ops team was constantly trying to play catch up with all of that changing information, and then trying to build all of the reports and visibility that the sales leaders needed on top of all of that. It was extremely difficult for our sales operations team to really maintain. So of course they were looking at, do we add headcounts? A lot of the similar struggles that many operations teams face. But fortunately, we were able to take on our solution, and roll that out across our territory capacity and quota planning practices, and really start to build more strategic efforts into how we build our plans. Again, we as Varicent have lots of great growth goals. We're going into new markets, selling new products, and being able to be more strategic with how we go to market has really been a tremendous value for us internally. So it's been great to experience this firsthand as we go on this journey of improving sales planning efforts with our customers.
So eating one's own dog food, or drinking your own champagne is the case.
Another way to say it, you bet.
Well, for somebody like me, a compensation professional that embraces change, what do you suggest, what we do to help our sales planning colleagues prepare for a step like this?
Such a great question. And, honestly, the best first step, if you're not already there, is building an alliance with your sales operations team, or whoever it is that is leading your sales planning efforts. It might be a person, it might be a team, it might be a department, but the better your teams can work together. And when I say work together, I'm talking about the people, the data, and the processes that you have in place. Really, when you can start to drive more efficiencies across all those aspects, you're really going to set your sales teams up to better succeed. So find a starting point that really is going to be beneficial to your sales comp team as well as the operations team. So technology aside, maybe that is just building an agreed upon communication plan between the teams. This is when you can expect the quotas. This is when you can expect the territories. But maybe if you're already doing that, maybe it's not so much friction between ops and the comp team, but it's the communication to the actual sales organization and figuring out what that change management program really looks like. To your point, Scott, oftentimes the comp team is ready to roll with the changes, but the sales sellers themselves, not so much. So figuring out how to get better at communicating the plans to your sellers might be a great next step.
I love it.
There's also, of course, tremendous value in committing to a solution that's really going to bring all of these efforts together as well.
Well, I'm much better prepared to have those types of conversations because of this conversation. So thank you. So Sarah, what do you wish you knew more about?
Oh gosh, so many things. But specifically within the sales planning space, one of the things that I'm most excited about, and I believe you had Joel Shapiro on this conversation as well, and he's a great resource for some of the things that he's doing over at Kellogg. But the topic of advanced analytics and applying advanced analytics to sales organizations. Sales has been a little bit behind some other areas of the business at embracing predictive capabilities and advanced analytics. But some really sophisticated sales teams that have adopted it are really doing some exciting things. So my goal, and something that we're certainly focused on here at Varicent, is really being able to find new, more approachable ways for sales organizations to leverage advanced analytics. So, if a sales leader or sales operations leader is not a data scientist, that's okay. We can provide solutions that can bring those types of capabilities to the sales organization. So I talked about this briefly in the context of account scoring and segmentation. So being able to better understand your customers. But there's so many things that you can really do by leveraging this new technology to really take your sales planning to the next level. And to me, that's something that's really exciting in the sales planning space.
Well, Sarah, best of luck in your learning journey. And thanks again for sharing your expertise on this really important topic.
Of course. Thanks for the time, Scott.